Pregame.com.
I'm Vegas Runner, here with Scott Spreitzer. NBA season winding down, final week ahead. Important game in the Eastern Conference. Sixers at Indiana on Saturday night. We made the line, projected Indiana to be a 3-point favorite against the Sixers. Philly started off the season extremely hot. I mean, they ran away with it in that shortened NBA season. I credit it more to scheduling coupled with a nucleus that's been together for a couple years that gave them a slight advantage. But now all of a sudden, this team's holding on for 8th place, you know, just to make the playoffs.
Right.
Flip side, Indiana, they're one of the hottest teams in the NBA that nobody's talking about. And last year in the playoffs, they gave the Bulls all they can handle. This is a team I think nobody wants to face in the playoffs. They're fighting right now for the 3rd spot. They're 21-8 at home. Not a team you want to be playing at their place. Who do you like in this one?
Well, I mean, you said it perfectly. And as far as the Sixers, and you talked about how well they were doing earlier in the season, and I went back, you know, they're the epitome of an NBA bully. I went back and looked since mid-February how they've done against non-playoff or non-playoff contending teams, 7-3 straight up. Against teams that are bound, playoff bound, or contending for the playoffs, how about 2-10 straight up the last 12? So it really is the epitome of a bully. If you saw Iguodala the other night, he finally hit the 20-point mark. He had gone over 40 straight games without hitting that 20-point mark. He scores 23 against Indiana. The Pacers won the game. The other 4 starters, unfortunately for Philly, were 9 for 27 from the floor in that contest. So they need some guys to step up. Spencer Hawes is healthy. He's got to play well. He had 12 and 8 against Indiana the other night. But here it is. Philly's on their 2nd game when this game takes place of a 5-game season-ending road trip. And they could have a little bit of an advantage in that Indiana between now, we're talking about this game Thursday afternoon, between now and Saturday night, Indiana could very well wrap up that number 3 seed. They need a win going into Thursday night's game and a loss combined with a loss by the Atlanta Hawks to wrap up that seed. So this game could matter very little to the Indiana Pacers. Now, I'm not one of those guys who's a must-win, will-win type of guy, because if you're in a must-win situation at this point of the NBA season and 8 teams make the playoffs, you're not a really good basketball team.
And you're usually being charged the premium because it's no secret that a team must win.
Well, that's the thing. We project this line as 3 as far as Indiana. If they've wrapped up that seed, this line's going to be a little bit less than 3 in all likelihood, and so you're not getting the same type of spread that you would if it was a regular setup. But, you know, here's the deal. I mean, Indiana's 10-1 going into Thursday, their last 11 games. What have they won? 6 in a row. Philly was a 3.5-point, I should say they beat Philly as a 3.5-point dog on Tuesday night, despite shooting less than 42%, because they hit 13 for 24 from behind the arc. And so here's the deal with me. Now, if Indiana comes into this game, yeah, they could be the looser team if they've wrapped up that 3 seed. A little bit of nerves, a little bit of tightness possibly from the Sixers if they're in must-win time. They do have a couple of game cushion right now on Milwaukee for that 8th spot. But the bottom line is I think Philadelphia matches up pretty well in this game on Saturday night, and I don't think that Indiana is going to be able to hit over 50% of their trays, especially if their top players are taking some time off if they have that 3 seed wrapped up. So VR, I mean, it's a pretty simple analysis as far as I'm concerned. I'm not saying it's a simple winner. There aren't simple winners, but my simple analysis say you back the Sixers here, especially if Indiana's wrapped up that number 3 seed.
I can't disagree with you, and I watched that game, you know, the other night, and that's exactly what happened. Indiana hit 13 3-pointers, 54% from behind the arc, and that's against a Philly team that's 6th in 3-point percentage allowed. So this is a good perimeter defense. But when I looked in the box score, I also noticed that Indiana had 13 more field goal attempts. So, I mean, here's a team that had more possessions. They were on the road. But I have to agree with you. I think this may be a little letdown spot for them. And I'm never one that likes to back must-win teams because I know you're being asked to pay a premium. And more importantly, there's so much added pressure on those teams.
Oh, yeah, they'll be tight,
you know,
possibly.
But I think it's better to back those teams when on the road than when they're at home, because then there's that added pressure. You're at home in front of your home crowd. You have to win a game. To me, that's a fade, you know. But on the road, I have to agree with you. The side that I'm going to look at here also is the under. I think we're going to get a good number because of the fact they just played 2 nights ago. The game almost reached 200. The total is 184.5. We may see an adjustment a little higher, may see 186 out there. I made my total 182 for this game. So for me, I think there's going to be line value on the under.
Sure.
And here's two teams that are just as good as it gets defensively. I mean, you got Philly second in points allowed, Indiana ninth in points allowed. Both are hold teams to incredible field goal percentage defensively. And I like the fact that they both are willing to go 10 deep.
Sure.
That's teams to me that usually play defense because they're not exhausted.
Right.
They're going to give you a whole 48 minutes of in-your-face defense when you go 10 deep. And that's what these two teams pretty much do.
Plus, you got Philly with 2 days off in between games.
Yeah.
They haven't played since Wednesday night by the time this game tips off. So, you know, and when your legs are a little bit wobbly, the first thing to go is usually your intensity on the defensive end. But when you're talking depth and 2 days off between games,
I agree.
They'll be intense.
So we're going to lean to the Sixers here. Scott likes the Sixers. Depending on the situation, remember, make sure you check the standings and see who's wrapped up what position, because right now everyone's jockeying for position. And rest assured, odds makers are taking a look at that because public perception is definitely going to be weighed into these numbers this final week of the season. I lean under as well. That's going to do it for Saturday's action. Don't forget, go to pregame forums. We have all of our videos up in one thread along with conversation from the handicappers and members of the forum. We're going to be back the first baseball game we're covering this season. I was going to wear a jersey, but Scott's always decked out, so I didn't want it to be that far contrast. But we're going to break down a big one. Texas Rangers, Detroit Tigers. Don't get any bigger than that for April in baseball.